The word pivot gets thrown around a lot in business. But let's be honest, pivoting is one of the scariest and most challenging things that we can do in life and in business. Whether it's changing direction in your business or making a major life change, pivoting requires courage, adaptability, and often a willingness to let go of what's familiar. But here's what I've learned. Some of the most successful people and businesses are those who've mastered the art of strategic pivoting. Today, we have this pleasure of speaking with Krystal Hanks, who is not your typical attorney. Before entering the legal profession, before entering the legal profession, she spent 20 years building and operating a multi-million-dollar business in construction and roofing. We're going to explore how to recognize when it's time to pivot, how to do it successfully, and why pivoting might be the most important skill in thriving in today's business world. Welcome, Krystal.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now, I know our listeners are probably like, what? Roofing, construction to an attorney? We're going to delve into that in just a minute because I am equally as intrigued. I'm very curious as to how that happened. But I want to start with the basics. What do you consider as a pivot? What's your definition?
Yeah, I would define a pivot as a substantial, significant change in direction. So, it doesn't have to be a complete turnaround, but definitely a significant change in direction from, where you're currently going.
Okay. That's how I would view it as well. We all have smaller pivots that we don't really think about in the time. And then later we look at it and we're like, wow, how did I connect the dots there? What was that path? So I'm curious, as I know our listeners are, what is your personal experience in doing that pivot? I talked at the very beginning about how you went from construction and roofing to the law profession. How did that look? How did that transpire?
Well, I have wanted to be an attorney for about 20 years prior. It's something that was like kind of always in my heart, but really something that I thought was kind of an unobtainable goal. I could never really leave my business for longer than 5 days. And so it kind of came about. I began interviewing for a CEO. And in that interview, it kind of reignited like this dream of going to law school. And so I was already at the time like doing a lot of, corporate representation. We had a lot of AOBs in Florida. So I was constantly.
What's an AOB?
In the roofing industry, it was an assignment of benefits.
Okay.
So we would get these assignment of benefits, and then basically we would be the ones suing the insurance company. So I was constantly doing like arbitrations and depositions. So that kind of reignited it as well. And then, I thought, well, I'm never going to go to law school if I don't take the LSAT. So I decided I was going to take the LSAT. So I, set time aside. I did that. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to go to law school if I don't apply. So I applied and then I got accepted. And I was like, well, I guess I'm going to law school. So it kind of really just happened just like that.
How did that feel? Because you said that you've wanted to do this for 20 years. And let me go back to before, how do you feel? What was the reason? Why for 20 years was it that specific thing that you wanted to go to school for? What was it that intrigued you with that?
Yeah, I think it's because I love business, and I've worked with many attorneys over the year, and I really respect the legal profession. But a lot of attorneys are attorneys who have never had any experience in business. I've had a lot of bad experiences with attorneys, or just if they had known how to ask the right questions, then I would have made a different decision in how I pursued litigation, or how, what my strategy would be, or do I want to deal with this? And so, I think a big part of it is just, wanting to be able to provide that excellence in service as an attorney. And, as a roofer, also, doing AOBs and, working with attorneys all the time, it's like we were, I was like the middleman, or, the attorneys were the middleman, really. So I really wanted to kind of cut out the middleman. But I thought I would be doing a lot more property insurance claims, but I'm doing a lot more business law. I'm doing a lot more litigation. So, I'm doing less property insurance claims than what I thought. So the path has kind of changed, but that's kind of, what made me want to, be in that profession.
So how did it feel once you made that decision and you started on that path?
I mean, it was scary. It was a huge sacrifice for my family. I've been the CFO, I've been the COO of our businesses for, 20 years. And so, for my family, it was going to be, my absence from the business was very evident, and so everybody having to kind of pick up different, roles, wear different hats and fill in the gaps from where, I couldn't be there. And I did, continue to work in our businesses, but that first year was really, really hard. I mean, it was typical for me to, go to bed at 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning and have to wake up at 5 or 6 in the morning just to finish my work. Like it was very like, can I do this? Like it was scary. It was hard. There were definitely times I thought, oh my gosh, am I too old to do this?
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. And I'm sure that people, I mean, I went back to school. I know what it feels like where you think that,
Right.
but we're never too old to learn.
Absolutely. Yeah. And going through it, it's I think it was so good for my kids to see as well.
Mhm.
It was really inspiring to them. And I think they really respect that. And I think it's really helped them to know that like you can do hard things,
Right.
and
How did that feel being an adult learning? Do you think you got more out of the experience and maybe learned more because you had more experience? Or I'm curious about that part of being a student later in life.
definitely. Yeah, I mean, the average age was like 26. So I was like, almost could be a mom to some of these, kids that were, I mean, a lot of them were 21, 22 years old. So, I'm going to school with a lot of young kids, but I do feel like it definitely, I had insight that other people didn't have when it came to,
Sure.
to answering questions and just the thought process of this of like, okay, but this is like, maybe very educational. It works like in theory, but in the real world, it doesn't work like that because, it's not, it's
Right.
just different in the real world. And so I definitely think that contributed a lot to my experience at law school. And I mean, I loved it. It was a journey of growth and, proving that, I'm not too old and proving, that if I'm not too old, guess what? You're not either.
Mhm.
So I think it's been a great experience.
It's a good lesson, like you said, for your kids and for anybody else who is an older learner and wanting to consider, well, oh, I'm too old. And then they hear your story. No, I'm not. Like
No,
you went to
you can
law
do hard
school.
things.
You went to law school, which that's a long process. That's very
Yes.
admirable. Now, what are some of the signs for our listeners out there? What are some of the signs that maybe it's time to do a pivot in their business or maybe it's in their life? Did you have any signs like that? Or have you seen signs that other people have said, you know what, I realized this?
Yeah, I think some of the signs are that well, first of all, what you've always been doing or what you're currently doing is no longer working. Also, signs of I'm not passionate about this anymore. Like what I'm doing, like I'm burnt out. Like I feel like I need to do something different. Like the thought of, it's scary, but at the same time, it's like I'm tired of doing what I used to do and I feel stuck and, my growth feels stagnant.
Mhm.
And I don't like that. I'm a person's always learning and growing and wanting to be better. And so with learning and growing, then pivot is natural
Right.
because you can't stay where you are. You have to pivot in order to continue that path of growth.
Would you say so that it's more of a natural feeling, like a gut feeling?
I think so. Yeah.
Mhm. So you talked about fear. You just said something about fear. And how was that process? Because I can't even imagine leaving the company that your main company to go do something like law school and break out and do your own thing. What role does fear play in that pivoting process?
I think it's a very natural it's a very natural feeling, and especially for me, I'm a person that I like to know what's like next. I'm a planner. I like to be in control.
Yes.
So the fear of the unknown and like, oh my gosh, like, are my businesses going to make it without me? Like, what's going to happen? Like, everybody depends on me. I don't want to let anyone down. I mean, there's, that constant,
Right.
gibberish in your head that's going on. And so I think that's fear is a very real part of making that change. And I think you have to overcome it, because if you don't, it paralyzes you and then it prevents you from, fulfilling your destiny. So you have to do it even if you're afraid. Like you just have to, I feel like it's like you just have to be 100% committed and then just do it even if you're afraid. And then as
It's
you start
scary.
doing it, then it's like that fear dissipates and,
Sure.
it starts feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad. I'm so thankful that like I decided to step out and do this.
Looking back in retrospect, absolutely. It was the right decision. I am sure you've heard the saying, do it scared. And sometimes that's the fuel, I think, that moves us forward. So moving from fear to judgment, I am sure as everybody's on the outside looking in and going, why is she doing this? Why is she doing that? Right? There's always people who are going to be judgy. How do you handle the judgment from other people, from whether it's within your company or maybe it's family who are in the background having those conversations? How do you deal with that?
Well, I guess for me, I'm like who I am all the time, right? So I don't really have a issue with people not understanding what I'm doing, or a fear of their judgment. And I also, I mean, my husband and my kids were very supportive. My team was very supportive, so I'm really thankful for that. But for me, it was like one of those things that like I had to make a decision, and other people aren't going to always understand what your journey is. They don't understand, what is best for you. And so
Mhm.
you can't be paralyzed by what other people think. Like they don't live your life. You have to get past that. So for me, it's easy because it's like I'm going to be who I am no matter what, and you can either come alongside me and support me and be happy for me, or don't. But I'm still going to do it either way.
That's a really great message. I'm doing it. I'm doing it my way, as
That's right.
Frank Sinatra used to say. So, looking back or looking forward to somebody who's listening to this, we all go through rough patches in our businesses and our lives. At what point, now I know we said that you feel it in your gut and everything, but at what point do you think somebody should move on or stay the course on something when it's not working, it's not working? Like, how long do you try?
I think that is like a very personal decision, right? I think you have to weigh the pros and the cons, and you have to look at like what is your goal? Are you working toward your ultimate destiny? Like, what is that? What is your ultimate goal? What is your ultimate destiny? And sometimes, everybody goes through
Mhm.
patches, but is that rough patch part of what you have to go through to get where you're going? Or is that just the constant, like, nothing's working? Like, it's like it's time to make a pivot. So I
Sure.
think that's a very like personal decision to look at. And I think for anyone watching this, I would say, looking at the pros and cons, and also, um, you know, that's still something I feel like that you have to follow peace. You have to know in your heart that like, okay, like this is really uncomfortable. You have to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's how you grow, and that's how you don't stay stuck and stagnant. But I think it's a personal decision of, am I fulfilled here? Is this part of the journey? And so I just have to stay committed and go through it. Because even when I was going to law school, it was really hard. I mean, there was definitely times that, like I said, I mean, there were times that I thought, gosh, am I too old to do this? Like, and also seeing the effect on like my family and my business. I
Mhm.
mean, there was a lot of sacrifices there, right? So it could have
Right.
been like, is this a mistake? Like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. And that definitely crosses my mind,
Mhm.
during that process. But I think that's a personal decision, and you just kind of know whether you are going through a rough patch and it's like, okay, maybe we need to regroup and make some changes
Mhm.
here, but I'm still happy in doing what it is that I'm doing and pursuing this. Or I'm not
Right.
passionate anymore. I'm not satisfied. I'm not fulfilled. And then it's like, okay, then you have to make that change. And that way you can start feeling that, and you're going to feel
Mhm.
pain either way. So, do you want the pain of regret, or do you want the pain of going through something very difficult, to obtain your goal and to like get the reward of that?
Mhm. Because regret is a very different feeling than having to go through
Absolutely.
the pain of actually doing. Do you think a lot of it helped you when you sat down and asked your why? Why am I doing this? Why do I want to do this?
Definitely. I think so. Because it's easy, like for me, for our businesses, I mean, these were my babies, like to step
Mhm.
away from them. Like I said, previous to me going to law school, I could never, I mean, even if we went on vacation, like I was always working on vacation, I could never step away for longer than 5 days. And even then I was working, right? It's like I
Mhm.
was, oh, so the thought of like, oh, like going to law school is like that's a joke, you know what I mean? How can I ever step away? But then when I kind of just started moving in that direction, it's amazing how like God like puts his super to your natural, and he meets you like
Mhm.
where you are. And so
Yes.
I really believe that's a big part of, the process of just stepping out and moving in that direction, and then
Mhm.
God meets you where you are, and somehow it just works out.
It's a God moment, really.
It is for sure.
So once you actually decided to make that pivot, what was your first step, and what would you suggest to our listeners as to the first step that they can take before they execute this big change that they're thinking of?
Well, I think the first step would to be 100% committed. Like, clarity. You need clarity to make a pivot. And so
Mhm.
you need to know, like, what is this going to take? And am I going to be willing to be 100% committed to this? And then, knowing what it is, okay, this is what I need to do. Like, I've got to take the LSAT, then I've got to apply. Like, this is going to take time away from my business. This is going to take time away from my family. Knowing this is a
Mhm.
3-year commitment, right? Like, I think that knowing that and saying, am I willing to do this? Because once you commit, like, you need to be 100% committed and follow through with it. And so then you can start taking, even baby steps towards that. Like I
Mhm.
said, I took the LSAT first, and then I'm moving slowly in that direction before I even really pivoted truly, before I actually took
Right.
the step of going to law school. So it's like in between that time, I'm getting my ducks in a row. I'm, saying, okay, financially, what do I need to do here? Like, how is this going to work with my family? Like, who's going to fill in the gaps for our business? And I mean, there's a lot of work that went into it. A lot of
Mhm.
people, really did step up and, support me. And that is helpful. Like, if you don't have that, then you have to plan a little bit more. But don't be afraid to do it alone. I mean, there's lots of pivots I've made in
Mhm.
my life that like I had to just do it on my own alone with no support. So
Mhm.
you can do it. You can do hard things.
Well, I think that's really the crux of the story here is you can do hard things, and you have all along. The one thing that really intrigues me is the practicality of what it was that you had to do within your business to make this pivot to going to law school, because you were running a successful business. You had a lot of people that you had to make sure that they were taken care of financially, not just in your family, but also in your business. I mean, did you put together like a playbook as to how people were supposed to do all of their jobs so that you could step away? Or what did that look like?
I would love to say that I did that, but once I started like taking the LSAT, I mean, you could just kind of see me disappearing. Like, I mean, I was really like,
Mhm.
I really was more checked out at this point. It was like I was kind of already 100% committed. But we did hire a CEO, and I'm really thankful for that time. And we ended up letting him go like after it was about a month before my finals of the first year. And so that didn't work out. But that first year was really, really important, like in law school, because like you don't really have time to like,
Sure.
I couldn't really manage our business or anything, during that first year because there just wasn't enough hours in the day. I didn't even have enough hours in the day to sleep. So, but it's like, it's funny how that worked out. Like year 2 and 3 were much easier to manage and I could be much more
Mhm.
involved in our business. And so it's like, God brought somebody in for, the time that we needed it. And then it didn't work out, but it was okay after that. I was able to still, contribute and then, build up to the time when, I was finishing law school. And because everybody knew, like, I'm not coming back, I'm starting my own firm. And
Right.
so, and
Right.
I still have input. I still, oversee, some things and help in that because it's my husband's business. So,
Sure.
my work's never done.
Right. So the other part that I'm really interested in is as you were doing this pivot, how did you leverage the existing skills that you had and maybe existing relationships or resources? How did that all fit into the pivoting picture?
Yeah, I think that that's like a natural part of, pivoting is that you are bringing with you these skills. You're bringing with you these resources. They might not be great, right? And the relationships as well. I mean, when I became an attorney, like in Naples, I really didn't have the relationships. I mean, I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I have,
Mhm.
we know everybody there. Like everybody knows us there, right? So I actually am a licensed attorney in Tulsa and Oklahoma. I'm Oklahoma and Florida. And so, the relationship building was not something that, I mean, I started doing that after I became an
Sure.
attorney. And, the Lord like really opened a lot of amazing doors and
Mhm.
I've had amazing mentors and he brought those into my life after the fact, right? That's not something I brought with me. But the skills of just, being in business for 20 years, having a different perspective, like going through lawsuits, understanding the real stress, the pain, the, difficulty of going through that, the financial stress, just the stress of keeping you up at night.
Mhm.
Those things, like I had already been through that and also seeing what attorneys did wrong, that I'm like, okay, well, I can learn from this. Like, and me as an attorney now, that really helps me because I have a different perspective and insight that I bring to my clients, but I also like, talk to them about like the real, do you want to pursue this? You really need to understand what the risk is and you need to understand what this is going to cost. And I think that's
Yes.
it's an important thing that a lot of attorneys don't really, talk to you about. And I think that's why there's so much distrust, in the legal profession is because there's a lack of just openness and maybe it's because they don't have that experience and they haven't gone through it themselves and they don't have the business background, but that
Mhm.
just that comes natural to me, so it works really well for what I do and how I serve my clients.
And that is a competitive advantage. When you were saying that, I was thinking in my head, oh my gosh, your competitive advantage is the fact that you are a business owner first and foremost.
Right.
You understand that whole microcosm, whereas somebody who goes, and does the traditional path of going through law school right after college and so on and so forth, they have no idea. They haven't been immersed in that. So it's very
Right.
hard to just to talk about that.
It is, and even understanding like the subject talk, the subject of what it is, like, you have a case and it's about construction. Well, I'm the qualifier. I'm a
Mhm.
Florida qualifier for, roofing contractors. So, with that, it's like I have a very technical, I understand roofing. I understand roofing
Right.
businesses. I understand the struggles they go through. I understand the permitting process. Like there's a lot of things
Mhm.
that I understand that if you don't understand, like you aren't going to necessarily best serve your client because
Right.
you don't understand like how, that basically it helps me strategically know what steps
Mhm.
to take, right?
It makes you competitive, really.
Absolutely.
So, what are some of the unexpected benefits that came out of this pivot that you really didn't anticipate at the forefront of it?
Yeah, so I feel like, I've been the CFO and the COO of our businesses for,
Mm-hmm.
20 years. And, with that, I'm the person that's always in the background making everything work. Right. So I've
Mm-hmm.
never really
Right.
had, I would have told you like prior to law school that like I was a naturally social introvert. And then, after going to law school and then like I'm doing a lot of networking, I'm like meeting attorneys, I'm doing all these things. And like my personality type, like I've taken the 16
Mm-hmm.
personalities.com test, like prior and then after law school, two completely different. I was a defender now with a naturally social introvert, and now I'm an executive, and I'm very extroverted. And
Look at you
isn't
blossoming.
that funny? I think that's what it did. It got me out of
Mm-hmm.
my shell, and like, naturally I
Right.
think like nobody wants to go somewhere where they don't know anyone. And it's like, oh, I have to go make friends with people, and like that's scary, right?
You're like just biting
Exactly.
your nails. I don't want to do
And
this.
I still get nervous about it if I know I'm going somewhere that I don't know anyone. But it's like, guess what? I force myself to do it anyways because you have to be comfortable with the uncomfortable because that's how you grow. And if you don't
Mm-hmm.
do those things, like I can't tell you how many relationships have been forged and like really beneficial, like
Yeah.
mentor relationships where they've given me referrals.
Mm-hmm.
That's like, I thought, why am I doing this? Like, I've already, had lunch with this person twice. Like, they're not going to give me referrals. Like, and I do it anyways, even though, because I'm like, I'm going, right? I'm committed. And then, beautiful things come out of that relationship and they end up being like very, very valuable relationships and
Mm-hmm.
mentorships. And it's like doing it afraid, doing it anyways, even
Yes.
though you feel like you don't want to. And it's like, oh, I'm nervous. My tummy is hurting. Like, all of that.
Kicking
And
and screaming.
then, yeah. And then when you go, you start getting used to it. You meet, more people that you actually know. And like, then it's like, it's actually fun.
Right. So what would you say the biggest lesson that you learned about yourself throughout this journey was?
I would say that the biggest lesson that I learned is that I can genuinely do hard things. And I've always been a diligent and just fully committed person that, like,
Mhm.
everything I do with my whole heart. It's just how I was raised. But I'm the first person in my family to, go to college, first person to ever go to law school, right? So, these are things that, were not really passed down to me. And
Mhm.
so knowing that I could do this, and not only that, but doing it as a second career and then starting my own law firm straight out of law school. I mean, everybody, like, every professor, all the people are like, oh, you can't do that. You have to go work for a firm for a year or two. You got to do it. Right. And I'm like, I did an interview and I thought, literally I pay some of these people, in my own company a lot more money than what they offered me. And I'm like, I can't do it. Like, it's not worth it for my family. Like, it's going to be another huge sacrifice. And I'm like, to me, it was like the piece that I knew that
Mhm.
God gave me that, like, this isn't for you. I actually countered offered a firm who gave me an offer and they withdrew their offer. And I was like, well, God, you answered my question. I'm starting my
Exactly.
own firm.
Mhm. Sometimes they hit us over the head, right?
Yeah. So
The answers.
like,
Other times not so
did
much,
it.
but
And it was scary. And it's been amazing. Like, we actually, our first year, we already, our law firm has already won Best of Florida in two
oh
different
wow.
categories. So I think that's really cool.
Mhm.
Uh, I'm really excited. I'm really excited about the future, what God has for us.
That is so wonderful. So, as we start to wrap up, if someone listening right now feels stuck, but they're still scared to make any changes, what would be your advice to them for their first step?
For their first step, if they feel stuck, is start do the pros and cons list,
Mhm.
really, and like say, like, is this where I want to be in 10 years from now? And when you really look at it like that, like, then I think that helps you make a decision. Is where I'm at right now and what I'm doing right now, am I going to be okay with this in 10 years? Because if you
Mhm.
don't make the pivot, you're going to be where you are right now in 10 years. So
Very
it's like
true.
I said, it goes back to that pain of the pain of regret, the pain of staying the same, or the pain of going through. It's going to be really hard. You're going to have to do hard things. It's going to be really uncomfortable. But on the other side of that, there's going to be this great benefit of accomplishing your dream and, becoming this stronger, more capable person.
Hmm. Great advice. Really great advice, because sometimes and most of the time, the pain of regret is far worse than actually going through the thing, whatever the
Absolutely.
thing is. Yes. Are you
Absolutely.
ready for our final four?
Sure.
All
Let's do
right.
it.
So the final four is something that I do with every guest that I have on the show. And I just love hearing people's answers. So the first question is, what is your favorite book that you have read, and what made it stick with you?
I would say a favorite book that I've read recently, I'll say recently,
Okay.
is The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. So
Oh, yes.
I really
That's
like that
mentioned
book.
a lot. It's a great book.
Was it? I really like that because for me, I like, I like to control.
Mhm.
I want everybody, like I want to be the best version of myself. I want other people to live, to be the best versions of themselves, but you can't change other people. And so, I think what made it stick is just the fact that when you let them, whatever that is, right?
Mhm.
If it's a relationship with your dad, if it's a relationship with your mom, your child, and they're not doing the things that you think that they should be doing, but you let them and you just see them where they're at, then it releases you from resentment, bitterness, that judgment against them. And it helps you
Mhm.
just love them the way they are. It doesn't mean that you have to, continue, putting up with things that you should not continue putting up with. But it's just, what, if that's the life that you're going to choose it. But I don't have to be part of that. And I don't have to be affected by that. I can choose to let you do that, love you anyways, even if it's from afar. And so I think that was really helpful to me.
Yeah, it was a great book. It really was. Do you have a favorite quote or piece of advice that you find yourself coming back to time and time again?
Yes, definitely. I'll have to, I'd have to say probably a couple. Can I say
Mhm.
two? Okay.
Sure.
One of them is be true to thine own self. And so that comes from a play, a Shakespeare play in Hamlet. And really, what it means is that, like, if we are not true to ourselves, we can't be true to other people.
Mhm.
Like, so many times people are living a life or they're, doing the things they're doing for everybody else. They're not being true to themselves. And we have to be honest with ourselves. And then a result of that is that we will be honest with other people. And so I think I love that. But also, my mom, who passed away unexpectedly, she had a quote, and her quote was, "Mama, don't take no shit." And so
That's great.
I incorporate that as well because you know what? Like, I'm too old to put up with some of these things, and I'm just not going to do it. And so I think
Amen.
that's right.
That's a good one. That is really good. Um, what habit or practice that you have used over the years has genuinely changed your life for the better?
Oh, that's hard because I feel like I've had a lot of practices and a lot of habits. When I commit to something, I'm 100% committed. So I would say for me, I give my all to whatever it is. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. And so I think that has been life changing for me. And it's a big part of how I have been able to accomplish what I have. And, I use it with my kids as well. Like, anything worth doing is worth doing right. And so, give your all to whatever it is. And
Mhm.
even if you're not being rewarded where you're at, like God will reward that and you will be promoted.
Mhm. That's great. Love it. And if you could have dinner with anyone, who would you choose and why?
If I could have dinner with anybody, it would be my mom who passed away unexpectedly. And I would do anything just to see her face and to
Mm.
hug her and, to hear her talk about anything that she wanted to talk about, where I was fully engaged and not too busy, with
Mhm.
life and, business and everything else, that I just wasn't listening. And so, never take your family for granted. And I would do anything just to have dinner with my mom again.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. Krystal, I have thoroughly enjoyed our time together today. I love your journey. I love how bold you were to say, you know what, no, this is what I want and I'm going for it. And I love it. It's such a great lesson for our audience and such a great thing for them to hear. If our audience would like to connect with you, how can they do so?
Yeah, find me on social media. They could also reach out to me by email. My email is KH, like Krystal Hanks, at krystalhankslaw.com. But I'm always happy, like, when people reach out to me and they just are like, they need a little kick, need a little encouragement. I've had lots of people that, the Lord has brought across my path who are just, needed that inspiration. And so, yeah, you can find me on social media. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, as well as, my email.
Fabulous. Thank you so much again, Krystal.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you to my listeners.